If you're Microsoft or .NET developer, chances are you are already familiar to Visual Studio. This is a video which introduces on developing AngularJS applications using Visual Studio 2017. This video is not intended for beginners who do not have any understanding about AngularJS 2.0. If you are completely new to AngularJS 2.0, I strongly recommend you to refer to my previous video before proceeding ahead. And in this video, we mostly concentrate on how to get things working using Visual Studio. What are the goals of this video? Few things are expected from your side. That is, you should have some understanding about AngularJS 2.0 or above. That is, like modules, components, how TypeScript is going to be used, how system.js is going to be used, how to configure TypeScript, how to compile TypeScript, and so on. And on top of that, your machine should have Node and NPM already installed, that is version 6 plus and 3 plus respectively, and you should have a better understanding on how package.json is going to be working, which actually is mainly used to install or uninstall Node packages. And on top of that, you should have Visual Studio 2017 installed. What is going to be covered as part of this video? We are going to create a Visual Studio project from the scratch, and in fact we try to create a ASP.NET project here even though we do not write any C# or .NET related code. We create ASP.NET project exclusively for the web server purposes, but we do not write any kind of .NET code as part of this video at least. And apart from creating Visual Studio project here, we are going to have a complete development environment to be set up for an Angular application locally for that application alone. We are going to develop a simple AngularJS 2.0 application, and we are also going to demonstrate on how Visual Studio IntelliSense is going to be working in order to develop Angular based applications. We are also going to see on how to compile or transpile our TypeScript files. And in order to compile our TypeScript files, you can always do that as part of the Visual Studio itself. So which means you can use Visual Studio to compile TypeScript files, or you can also go out of Visual Studio and compile the same TypeScript files. You are also going to use Gulp here, just in case if you'd like to have all of these to be automated. So if you are not familiar to Gulp, just refer to my previous videos as part of the same channel. Next, we are going to execute our Angular based application directly from within Visual Studio or outside Visual Studio, which means whenever I say outside, it is essentially using command prompt. We can also debug our Angular based application with the code which is written in TypeScript completely from within Visual Studio and without really going out of Visual Studio. So in simple, we would like to leverage and take advantage of Visual Studio as much as possible in this video in order to develop Angular based applications. Before even jumping into Visual Studio, let us make sure that we have Node and NPM already installed on my machine. So I go to command prompt, and in here I am going to test whether Node has been installed by typing a command node-v. In this case we have 6.10 installed, and similarly we should have npm also installed with version 3.10. So make sure that both of those are installed on your machine prior to proceeding ahead. And now I am going to switch to Visual Studio. And inside the Visual Studio, the first thing is that I need to create a new project from the scratch. So for that purposes, I am going to click on File and go to New and click on Project. So we are going to select ASP.NET Web Application by actually drilling through C# Web and then going through this one. We are not going to write any ASP.NET or C# related code. We will be focusing on AngularJS, but the project type what we are going to create now is going to be ASP.NET Web Application. And you can also see that I am currently giving the name of the application as Web Application 1. You can provide your own name, and it is going to be stored in C temp. So if you switch to C temp, you can see currently this is the folder which is completely empty. And the moment I click on OK, it is going to ask what type of template you'd like to use. I just would like to go with the very basic, like literally nothing. Empty template, which means no files related to ASP.NET will be included, no web forms, no MVC, no web API, nothing, no unit tests, and no authentication. So it is just empty with no other features enabled. Click OK. So the moment you click in OK here, you can see it is going to have the folder web application 1 to be created inside your temp folder. Now once you switch back, you are going to see your Solution Explorer with all the ASP.NET related default stuff. We are not going to use any of that stuff. We are going to create our own stuff and make sure that that stuff is really working. So the first thing is that we need to make sure that our particular application is really being executed or successfully being executed by pressing this button. So which means you should be able to debug our application and test it just by simply pressing this button or pressing F5. So for that purpose, I just would like to create a new HTML page for our testing purposes. So I'm going to say add HTML page. So in this case, I'm going to say something like dummy. You can provide your own name there. And in this case, I'm going to say something like this is dummy web page. I just would like to make sure that this is working by just pressing this button. And if you have IIS Express installed and your Visual Studio 2017 working successfully, you should be able to see your web server automatically having its own port number determined by your project, and on top of that it should be automatically going to dummy.html, which in fact shows the message whatever we typed in. Okay, so now that we understood like our project is working fine for debugging and other purposes, let us get rid of this dummy.html and start creating the real AngularJS stuff. So before even proceeding anywhere, the first important thing for AngularJS application is bringing in all the libraries of AngularJS. That can be easily achieved by using Node Package Manager. And in order to start NPM with our application, we should have package.json. And the easiest way to include package.json as part of your application is either using command prompt or directly using the Visual Studio here. So in this case, I would like to use Visual Studio. So I just right click on the project there, go to add new item, just search for installed templates and go for NPM, and you are going to see NPM configuration file. The moment you select it, you are going to see package.json right there, and click add. And now you can see you have package.json already made available as part of your application. So in here, we need to include all the necessary AngularJS related libraries. But typing those libraries could be very difficult if you don't know what kind of versions are currently available or latestly available. So the easiest way to include each of those libraries again is through command prompt. So in this case, let me just add one library called Angular Core, for example. So for that purposes, I will be switching back to command prompt for a moment by going to open folder. So which means I am going to open my web application folder directly in Windows Explorer or Fire Explorer. So you can see right here. So I'm in temp, and inside that I have web application, and this is the project folder, and inside that you can see I have the package.json. So try opening your command prompt right in here and start installing any of your AngularJS libraries. So all the AngularJS libraries which are necessary have been already covered in my previous video. So refer to that one if you do not understand this stuff. But in this case, I just would like to go with a very basic one called something like npm install, and I would like to save that installation directly to our package.json, and I'm going with angular /core or common. So in this case, let us consider I'm typing something like this, and you will be having bunch of other libraries to be included before even proceeding ahead. But for now, we just go with one so that we are going to see and how it is going to be reflected in package.json. So the moment I press enter, you can see it has installed something, and of course it is expecting other dependency libraries as well. But for now, let us clear everything and see what's going on. The first thing you should be able to see is that you have node modules which has been automatically created. So once you open this, you are going to see Angular, and inside that the common. So this is the folder which will be automatically created by Node Package Manager in order to bring in all the respective libraries, download them, and get them installed as part of your application. And if you go back to your Visual Studio, you are going to see the package.json has been modified. So that's a notification. Click yes to reload it, and once you do that, you should be able to see your library, whatever you have added, from the command prompt. and all of those libraries, whatever you might be adding behind the scenes using the command prompt, will be automatically listed here. For some reason, let us consider you happen to delete this node modules folder. You are not going to see this node modules folder directly inside your Visual Studio. So if you open show all files, then you are going to see this, but there is no need of including that folder in your application at all. You can just make it completely hidden or exclude from your project. You don't quite need that in your Visual Studio or solution. So let us consider I am actually removing that folder, and which means if you remove this folder, you have removed everything you have downloaded. That is, in this case, you removed all the libraries or all the files related to this package. And how do we get it back? Do I need to again get back to our command prompt and reinstall them? Not really necessary. You have that simple option by right-clicking on the package.json and just say restore packages. So whenever we say restore packages, you are going to see this tiny thing at the very bottom saying that installing packages and the installations have been completed right here. So if you open output, you are going to see Angular common has been downloaded and installed, and if you switch back to your web application folder, you are going to see node modules again being created by ourselves. So let me make sure I again delete this. I go back here and restore packages, and again it is trying to install everything, and if you go back here, you should be able to see node modules. So in that way you can add as many number of libraries as you want for your AngularJS. But I do not want to install each of those libraries one by one, as because all of those have been already covered earlier. But in this case, I would like to have a reference to my previous video source code which has been uploaded to GitHub. So in this case, I'm going to switch to my GitHub account, that is TextCBT. So github.com/TextCBT, where the entire source code for all of the videos have been uploaded here. And you should be able to see YouTube channel source code. The moment you open it, now you should be able to see something like Angular 2 in this case. So I open this one, and this is the application which has been demonstrated and completely explained from the scratch in my previous video. So I'm going to reuse this code in order to make this video simple. So the first thing is that we need to include all the AngularJS related libraries in my Visual Studio solution. So I open package.json, and you can see I have tons of libraries which have been already mentioned here. So I just copy this whole thing. I go back to my Visual Studio, remove everything, and replace that with this one. So you can see I have all those versions or the libraries which have been brought in exclusively for my application. So in order to make sure everything works fine, let us ensure that I delete node modules folder here. So I go back, and in here, the simplest way, I can just right click here and restore packages. So the moment I say that, you can see it is installing all the packages here, and it is in progress right now because there are tons of things which are supposed to be downloaded, and you can always see the progress by opening your output. Okay, now that you have this command, this message which is saying installation of packages are all complete. So if you go back to your folder, and if you open node modules, you are going to see all those libraries which have been downloaded exclusively for our application, and you are going to see a bunch of Angular things, and you should be also able to see the TypeScript and other stuff. Okay, so the next one is Typescript configuration. So which means our code for AngularJS development will be developed using TypeScript. So in order to have TypeScript to be added as part of our application, the first thing is that we need to create a TypeScript file, write some code, configure our TypeScript in order to get it compiled. So the first thing, I'm going to add a new folder called app. And in this case, I would like to add some kind of very simple dummy TypeScript file. So I go to add new item. You can search for TypeScript. And you can see I have TypeScript file. You can provide your own name in here. So in this case, I'm going to call something like test.typescript. Press add, and I can just simply type in some a TypeScript code here. In this code, I'm going to create a simple test class, which is going to have something like message. So that's going to be the function which returns string. And on top of that, I'm going to use return with test. So this is a very simple class with just one method, and the method returning a message called test in the form of string. So this is the TypeScript file which I need to compile or say transpile into plain JavaScript, or say ECMAScript 5 in this case. So how can I achieve the compilation of this TypeScript so that all the browsers can really understand this code? So in order to accomplish that, the first thing is that we need to actually create tsconfig or TypeScript config.json. So the easiest way, again, right click here, go to add new item, search for TypeScript, and in this case you are going to see TypeScript JSON configuration file. Just select that, which actually gives you tsconfig.json, click add. And it is going to give you some default options, but I'm going to use my own options from my previous source code. And I go back here, go to tsconfig, and I'm going to use all of these options. So I just copy all of this stuff, write into my tsconfig. Okay, the next thing is that we need to compile this TypeScript. So how do I compile it? So there are a couple of ways in achieving this one. So the first one, let us compile this using command prompt. So again, I go back to command prompt. And how do you compile it? So if you have TypeScript globally installed, you can just type in tsc. It works. But in my case, I installed TypeScript locally, which means local to the application. So for that purposes, if you go back to your Node folder, you can see in the Node modules, you are going to see bin, and inside that you are going to see tsc.command. This is the one I'm going to use in order to compile my TypeScript from the command prompt, not from the Visual Studio yet. So how to compile from command prompt? So I'm going to say node modules /.bin /tsc. That actually compiles all the TypeScript files available in my application. So if you go back here, and if you actually show all the files, you are going to see test.js, which has been automatically created by the compilation. So again, let me remove these two files. And again, I compile this. I go back, refresh this, and you are going to see those two automatically generated. You should be able to see them directly in your folder as well. So if you open your app folder which has been created, you are going to see these two have been created after compilation or compiling this TypeScript file as well. Okay, what are the other ways to compile this? I know it will not be very convenient to always switch to command prompt and do the things. So we should be able to have these things automatically done from our Visual Studio. So let us refresh this. Now you can see there are no files, or say no compiled files of the TypeScript. The simplest way, right click here and just build. So once you build, it actually tries to build using all the ASP.NET or C# related compilers and everything, as because we created a project as such. But even though it actually does everything, on top of that, it actually compiles even our TypeScript files as well. So you don't really need to go to your command prompt in order to compile your TypeScript files. Those could be automatically done the moment you say build your solution. That is the easiest way of compiling TypeScript files once you have tsconfig successfully configured. Okay, so the other way is actually involving Gulp. Let me remove this stuff. So what is the use of Gulp in our case? The use of Gulp in our case is it works as a task runner behind the scenes and watches for all of my TypeScript files, and if those TypeScript files have been created or modified, it automatically gets triggered. The Gulp triggers the compilation of any of those TypeScript files which have been modified or newly created. So let us see how we can achieve that. The first thing is add a Gulp file. So I'm going to add new item, search for Gulp, and here you should be able to see Gulp configuration file. So we have this Gulp file, click add, and you can see it has given some default stuff. Remove all that stuff. So prior to write any kind of code, there are a couple of things which needs to be downloaded for your package.json. So which means we need to have few more libraries in order to have Gulp to be working, and for that purpose I'm going to include a couple more. So in this case I'm going to use Gulp, that is going to be under the dev dependencies, so which means we do not want that in the production, only for the development. So you can see I'm saying that please get me Gulp client, Gulp related source maps, and also the TypeScript stuff related to Gulp. So all of these four are essential in order to have Gulp to be working. So I go back here. I can either say npm install to actually install the new stuff, or as I mentioned, you can always go with package.json, right click there and restore packages. But chances are Visual Studio is smart enough to actually monitor the modifications of package.json and try to download all that stuff automatically for you. And let me go to the temp, and in the Node modules you can see right here the Gulp has been automatically downloaded for us, and that too at the very latest way. So you have the Gulp utilities, Gulp TypeScript and everything. So you don't quite need to actually right click and restore, but you can still restore packages if you really want to be confident enough that it is really syncing up with all the package libraries locally. So I just would like to do this once again and make sure that all the packages are in place. And now as it says installing packages are complete, so which means all these packages are ready. Now I have to develop the script for the Gulp where it can be used to compile or transpile our TypeScript files, and at the same time maybe added with a couple more tasks for watching our TypeScript files and continuously compiling them as we modify them and save them, or as we create them and save them. So in order to achieve that, I need to write a couple of lines of code, for which I am going to copy and paste right now. And if you are not familiar with this code, again please visit one of my videos regarding on Gulp. So I included a complete video exclusively for Gulp alone. So I save this. In simple words, you can see I'm actually getting all those packages: Gulp, TypeScript, tsconfig. You can see I have the tsconfig here, Gulp source map. All of these have been included in my package.json. You can see all of these packages I'm referring here, and now I'm saying that from the TS configuration get me the source. So in this case that is nothing but our application folder, in this case all the source related stuff. On top of that, initialize the source maps, compile the project right here, and if we have any kind of source maps created, always write those to the current folder, and the current folder or the compilation of the whole of this one should always be written directly to app folder. And you can see our app folder is going to be the destination once all these compilations are going to be done. And this is a task which is named after default. Similarly, I am actually creating one more task called dev. So we are going to have two different tasks, default and dev. And you can use either this one or this one. However, this will be continuously watching for any of the .ts files available in the app folder. So if you have any of the TypeScript files which have been modified or newly created, then this task is going to be automatically switching to this task, which means it calls this task called default and immediately compiles those files which have been newly modified or newly created. So this is a watcher, and this is just to perform the compilation alone. So all of these can be performed directly either through the command prompt or from the Visual Studio alone. So let us start with Gulp from the command prompt itself. So I go back to command prompt. This is only for demonstration. So in this case, imagine I would like to work with Gulp. So I can just go with Node modules, and I have the Gulp installed in my bin folder as usual, and I can say Gulp and provide your Gulp task name. So in this case the task name is default. So if you don't provide default, it automatically figures out the default already exists, so it goes with that. So even if you don't provide default here, it knows that it can pick up default. So I can just remove that and click enter. And now you can see it tries to go through that task called default, and it has completed it. And if you go back here and refresh it, you are going to see those two automatically generated. So now again I can remove it. Okay, that is how you can use Gulp using command prompt. But again, I would like to keep myself away from command prompt as much as possible. So is there any better way I can use this gulp right inside Visual Studio? Yes, that is just by right clicking on that gulp.js, that is gulp-file.js file, and you are going to see Task Runner Explorer exclusively for that gulp file alone. And if you open it, you are going to see this. So just refresh this, and you are going to see tasks, default or dev. If you are not going to see this, just keep refreshing for a couple of moments and you are going to see that. And you can see this is our default. The easiest way to execute that is just double click on that one. Once you double click, it actually knows on how to execute it. So you can see it essentially goes through the same kind of command whatever we expressed earlier using gulp with all the necessary parameters finally to execute that default. Again, if I go back here and refresh this, you are going to see that automatically created. So let us see side by side. So this is my TypeScript file and this is my test.js file. So if this test is modified, it is supposed to modify this test as well. So I am going to say this is like first test. So I save this and I return back. It is not going to be immediately reflected here because a compilation needs to be accomplished. So I can just go back and double click this guy. And once that is done, you can see it is going to give a notification that it has to be reloaded. So I click yes and you are going to see first test right away. Now, it is always going to be problematic to go with clicking on that gulp file or gulp task every time. So rather, it is better to continuously watch for me and then go after the TypeScript files and immediately get them compiled. So the easiest way is to actually have our dev to be working. So just double click on that. And now you can see it will be continuously listening for any of those modifications of your TypeScript files. So just I'm pinning it here. Let's go back here. And now I am going to say second test, and the moment you click save, you can see it has automatically triggered our default task, compiled, it has notified, and if you return back here, you are going to see second. And again, if you see third, save it, you are going to see triggered, and it is going to be loaded right here. So you will not get any notifications if you don't have that file open. So all you have to do is just type in fourth, click save, and it is going to be triggered. So this is the easiest way on how you can have immediate compilation of each of those particular TypeScript files, whatever you are going to create new or modify existing. So I really like this approach personally, as because this serves both of the command line process and also from integration to Visual Studio inline. So you have both options at the same time. Okay, let us remove all of these files and let us start creating the original app files. So I would like to create the first file directly from my previous application. So that is going to be app, and in this case I have hello world component.ts. So I would like to demonstrate some kind of IntelliSense of AngularJS here. So instead of copying and pasting, let us go through if the Visual Studio supports IntelliSense of AngularJS related grammar. So I just would like to create a new file called hello world component.ts and type in this one all the way from the scratch and see how it works. So I go back here and I try to create a new file, add new item, and in this case I can just say hello world.component.ts, click add, and now let me delete everything here. The first thing is that I need to import Angular code. So I'm going to say from @Angular. So you can see IntelliSense is automatically working for me. And on top of that, from the core, I would like to actually get component. And you can see component is right there. And on top of that, I would like to use component right here. So I go down all the way and I would like to use component attribute right here. And on top of that, I would like to use export. And I would like to create a class called hello world component, and I would like to create getMessage as my first method, which returns a string, and in this case I would like to say return hello world. This is my first message, something like that. And I would like to configure my component here a bit. by actually writing this one. So in this case, I would like to mention the selector. So you can see I have the selector already in place. So I'm going to say hello, and at the same time I would like to provide some template. So you can see I can provide template, and in this case I would like to have strong, and I'm going to say get message, and this is going to execute my method called get message. And you can see all of these components getting from Angular code, everything is being automatically included as part of the IntelliSense. So you can really take advantage of Visual Studio IntelliSense in this case, and with no issues it should be able to automatically compile successfully. Okay, similarly let me add a couple more files. So I go back here, and along with hello world I should be having app-module.ts as well. So let me create a new file called app-module.ts. So I go back here, add a new file. In this case I am going to call this one as app-module.ts. Click OK, and let me copy some code from whatever I have in place here. So that is right here. This is the root module of our application. So go back here and copy this. So I save this, and you can see it should be able to have a hello world component to be automatically retrieved. So if not, let me remove this, and you can see hello world component is already there. So you can configure all of that good stuff right there. And let me include one more file for entry part, that is the main entry. So that is main.ts. So I would like to create this file as well. So main.ts. So I go back here, right click, add again a TypeScript file, and in this case main.ts, and the code for main.ts is going to be this. I save it, and now you can see I have my entire TypeScript related stuff successfully done. So what's going to be the next one? That is our system.js.config, which is mainly used to hook all of these things together and get them onto the web page. So I need to create a JavaScript file. So for that purpose I am going to add new item. So in this case just say JavaScript. So select JavaScript here, and I'm going to say system.js.config.js. So I'm going to just minimize this for a moment. So as part of this, again I would like to get the previous code, whatever I had in place. So I go to test. So you can see I have system.js.config.js. So I just copy this whole thing. So this whole code, whatever I am copying and pasting from this entire application, has been covered in my previous video, and you can get the complete details from there. So I save this. So the next thing, I need to create index.html, so which actually serves as the web page. So I go here, add a new item, and the HTML page. In this case I am going to target as index.html. Again, the code for that one I am going to reuse whatever I had in place. So just copy this, and I have everything in place right here. So looks like we are done with the application. Just press this button or press F5 in order to debug your application, and at the same time execute your application and show the web page directly in the browser, kicking up your web server. So I click on this, and if everything works, it has to come out with the browser and the web page together, loading your JavaScript together with Angular, and finally you should be able to see the output. And now you can see hello world, this is my message. So that is the message which we have actually got directly from your hello world component. So right here, this is the one, hello world, this is my message. So that is the message you are going to see right here. And you can also debug your stuff here. For example, I just put a breakpoint in your TypeScript file and click on this one. And once you do that, you should be able to see the breakpoint automatically hit at that moment, and you have the complete luxury of your immediate window, and at the same time your call stack, your local variables, your watches, autos, and everything. You have the complete luxury of Visual Studio debugging environment for your TypeScript, and that too for your AngularJS based applications. Okay, so is it supported for Chrome? Yes, it is, but a bit more different way. Like for example, I choose Chrome here and just press the same button again, and let us see whether it works. And initially it will be showing a different message here saying that it is kicking in the Chrome script debugging, and once it is there, it is going to show automatically. It is going to skip that page and jump right into our page here in this case. So that is one important thing. If you actually go to developer tools here, it is going to stop your debugging session, because you cannot debug both in the Visual Studio and in the Chrome browser at the same time. So if you are using this, just use this. But if you would like to use Chrome, you will not be able to use your Visual Studio both at the same time. Okay, but you can see it is not hitting the breakpoint here the moment I execute it. So let us try it again. So again, I click on this. It is not hitting the breakpoint earlier, and it will not either now. So you can see it tried to load, and it was here. It has loaded my application, but the breakpoint was not hit. And the easiest way, just refresh your web page and it is going to hit right away. And I don't know the reason at the moment. Maybe it could be fixed in future, but for now that is how Chrome is going to work. You have to always refresh your web page in order to get that one hooked. But as long as you are really debugging inside the Visual Studio, it will not matter on whether you are going to work with the Google Chrome or Internet Explorer until and unless you really want to use client-side tools to debug your application. Okay. And if for some reason you are not able to see this debugging or breakpoints working, make sure that you always have this option always set. That is, inside tools and options, you are going to see debugging, and inside the debugging, go for general, and inside the general, almost at the half of the way, you should be able to see this one. That is, enable JavaScript debugging for ASP.NET, that too for Chrome and IE. So the Visual Studio debugging environment is going to be kicked in if and only if you switch on this one. Okay, till now we have seen on creating a new ASP.NET project from the scratch and developing AngularJS application on top of that. There is one more way to accomplish the same using website project instead. So let's see on how we can achieve that. So this is my web application, so I just wanted to keep it like that for now. Again, let me create file, new website. So ASP.NET empty website, and here I am going to say sample website. And now you can see you will not find much difference with respect to how your directory structure may look like. So even if you go back to your temp folder, so let me close this. So you can see sample website. You are going to see with very minimal web files on how you are going to work with. So in this case, let us imagine I would like to bring in all my files, whatever I created from a previous folder. So let me close everything. Let me duplicate this, and the second one is going to be the sample website. So I just would like to bring in my Gulp file, my index, my package, system, tsconfig, and my app. So I'm just bringing all my AngularJS related resources only. So I just copy all of this and go back here and just copy all of those in here. And if you return back to your Visual Studio and if you refresh this guy, you should be able to see all of those readily available for you. So you don't even need to include them. So let us see the output here. So we don't have any of the output, and if you go back here, you can see no node packages are currently available. Again, you can just right click here and you can see package.json. Currently you do not have that option. That is, restore packages option is not available here. So the easiest way probably sometimes is actually modifying this and do some kind of modification and just click save. It is going to kick in your installations automatically. So you don't really need to jump into command prompt. So if you try to modify your package.json, Visual Studio is smart enough to think that package.json has been modified, and let us ensure that all of the related packages are locally made available. So in this case, I did not really modify anything. I just pressed enter, deleted the line, and just saved it. And again, you can see it is actually trying to download everything else. It might not show everything from the output point of view, but if you go back here, you should be able to see node modules with all of the stuff being downloaded successfully on your machine. It will take a bit of time on that one, but on top of that, as you have your Gulp file, you can always compile your stuff using Gulp file. So you can just right click here and go to the Task Explorer. So as mentioned, you just try to refresh this a couple more times. Once the installation of all the packages are done, you can see installing packages are complete. Still, you are not seeing anything in the output window, but behind the scenes it does everything. And if you switch back to your Node modules folder, you can see I have everything ready. So it is smart enough in that way. You don't really need to click restore packages, just modify package.json. And now I have the Gulp file. The simplest way, I run it. And now you can see it has successfully executed it, which means I should be having all my stuff automatically compiled here. So it looks like I already have all in place. So let me remove all the JavaScript files, as because I copied the entire folder. I just try to delete all this stuff and have only TypeScript files. Now I go to task folder, delete it. Let us try to execute my default again. It is trying to compile now, and let me refresh this, and you should be able to see all the JavaScript files. There is one more easier way. Of course, it might not be easier, but that is just an option. So I just delete everything here. You can ask your Gulp task to be always executed whenever you have completed your building of your project. So which means in this case, if I say after build option enabled, so I just click on it, and once you do that, you are going to see this check mark, which means this task default is going to be automatically executed the moment you build your solution. So that is pretty important. So the moment you build it, it is trying to build in its own way, but immediately after the build, you are going to see your task successfully executed as well. So once that is done, and once you refresh it, you are going to see all of those as well. There is one difference between ASP.NET project what we have created earlier versus this one. This is not going to automatically build your JavaScript files from the TypeScript files. That is very important. So let me delete this stuff, and you can see this default is not bound anymore. So this is not going to be kicking in. So just build it. So I built it, and let me refresh this. So you can see JavaScript files are not created. But in my previous project, that is ASP.NET project, all the JavaScript files have been created from the TypeScript automatically the moment I build it. But in the website project, that is whenever you are using file new website instead of project, you will not see TypeScript files automatically being built whenever you build your solution. Okay, so now that we have everything in place, so let us try to execute this and see whether it is working or not. So I would like to close this for now. And this is going to be my starting page, set as start page, and just press Google Chrome in here. Yes, it is done. And let us see if it is actually able to jump into my TypeScript and have a breakpoint there. So I'm going to put a breakpoint here, and the moment I say refresh, you can see it has automatically hit my breakpoint right there. So those are all the various ways on how you can use Visual Studio to actually develop your AngularJS applications without losing the luxury of IntelliSense and the compilation, and at the same time debugging capabilities.